Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2024 Honda CR-V, we're going to be showing you how to install the CURT Class 2 trailer hitch receiver. Before we do that though, let's take a couple minutes, check this out, and make sure it's going to be right for you. When it comes to picking out a trailer hitch for the CR-V, you know, there's quite a few different options, and with this one having the smaller receiver tube opening, I feel like this would be a good choice for those of you that really only plan on using some smaller accessories. Now that's not to say you can't tow and do other things with this hitch, but you know, if that's what you're looking to do, there are some better options out there. So like I said, if you already have an 1.25 inch accessory or really only going to use a 1 or 2 bike rack, this is a good option. If you're looking to do a little bit more or unsure what you're going to do, I would recommend a Class 3 hitch. That's because it has the larger 2 inch by 2 inch opening, so a little more versatile. I do want to address one of the big questions a lot of people wonder, and that is, you know, is putting a trailer hitch back here going to interfere with your hands-free liftgate assist feature? And on this particular vehicle, it does still work. You're just going to have to kick your foot to either side of that receiver tube opening, and the hatch will open up. With this having the smaller 1.25 by 1.25 opening, the hitch is going to use that 1/2 inch size pin and clip. Keep in mind though, one doesn't come with the hitch. If you need one, you can always grab it here at eTrailer. A lot of times too, if you end up picking up a new accessory, they'll come with one, so just something to look out for. The safety chain openings are going to be a loop style, and they're really easy to get to and should allow you to use just about any size hook that your trailer might have on it. Grab a couple of measurements now, and these will help you figure out what style of accessories will work best. You go from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube opening. That's going to be about 13.5 inches. So if your accessory has a straight shank, that's fine. You know, you'll have clearance back here. If you got one that has a rise in it, even better. Buy a little more ground clearance. And if you're going to be pulling a smaller trailer around, chances are pretty good you can use a ball mount that has a rise in it as well. Maybe that 2 to 4 inch range probably work good for a lot of people. From the center of the hitch pin hole to the edge of our rear bumper, that's going to be about 1.5 inches, which is really good. So you shouldn't see any issues here, but if need be, you can use that to help figure out that if any folding style accessories can be folded in that upright position without hitting the back of your Honda. As far as the weight capacities go, this is going to have a 350 pound maximum gross tongue weight rating. So that should be good for those 1 to 3, maybe even 4 bike racks, just depending on how heavy everything is, really. As far as the maximum gross trailer weight rating goes, that's going to be 3,500 pounds. That's going to be the amount of weight pulling on the hitch. So the weight of your trailer plus anything you might have in or on it. With that in mind though, I always like to recommend, never a bad idea just to grab your Honda's owner's manual. That way you can check in there and make sure that your SUV can pull that much weight safely. As far as the installation goes, it's really not too bad. You know, when you're doing your trimming and stuff, especially if you got the hands-free sensor, be real careful. You know, you don't want to damage that by any means, but really not too complicated. Shouldn't take you a ton of time, but with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our CR-V, and we're going to have to let the exhaust come down just a little bit, give us some extra space to work. So prior to doing that, I like to take a strap, just kind of run it from side to side. That way we can control how fast and how far we actually let the exhaust come down. To actually lower the exhaust, there's going to be a rubber isolator hanger up here in this area that we're going to need to remove. And then if you follow the exhaust forward to the front of the car, there's going to be another hanger, this one here, and we'll use that same technique to get that one off. With those hangers now removed, if you loosen up your strap, you're able to drop the exhaust down some and get that extra room we need to work. Moving to the bottom of our frame rail now, this is where our attachment points are going to be. And from this point on, whatever we do to one side of our vehicle, we'll also do to the other side, because it'll be set up the same way. But each frame rail is going to have 2 attachment points. We'll use this hole, and then this one, and then the larger holes we're going to use as access holes, so to speak. So what you can do is take the coiled end of your fish wire, all right, and I like to put a little bend in it there. Run it through that hole, out of the larger one, Then you can take your spacer block and your carriage bolt. That carriage bolt you're going to thread onto the pull wire there, and then just feed the hardware up into the frame until it drops down. And I'm going to use that same exact hardware combination and technique to get that one in. Along the bottom part of our fascia, there's going to be this plastic panel here that's attached to the fascia, and we're going to remove these clips. It looks like in our case there's 3, and from my experience, a lot of these Hondas, sometimes these will be all set up just a little bit different, so just keep that in mind. This is how ours is. We have one there. You just take a flathead screwdriver, pry down on the head of it, and then you're able to pull the whole base out. So we'll do the same thing for these 2. So you have your push pin. Another push pin here towards the front on each side. And it looks like the last thing holding it is just this bolt. It's a 10mm. That should be it. So it should drop down and make it a little easier to work with. Looks like we're gonna have to trim on the side of it, kind of somewhere in this area. Cut that material out, and then I'm just going to cut this whole little front edge piece off, and that should be enough. My thought is when you're doing this type of thing, cut as little as possible. If it's in the way, you know, when you go to put the hitch up, you can always come back and take more off, but can't really add the material, right? So that's my thought. I'm just going to use a pair of snips to get this cut. It's pretty relatively thin plastic. You could always use, you know, utility knife, just be careful, or multi-tool, or whatever you got around the house. Go ahead and get all this material cut off. Our panel here, I just popped that back up in place, you know, by putting a few fasteners that we just removed back in. To trim our fascia, you don't have to remove a whole lot of material here, but one thing I did, so in our case, we have the hands-free liftgate assist, so the sensor is actually behind the fascia. I don't want to cut into it, so I took some of the cardboard from the box, from the hitch box, and just kind of put that in between the sensor and the fascia. That way we just have a little cushion behind there. So to trim this, I'm going to use my multi-tool, but you can use your snips or whatever you got there. So I was able to kind of clean up the edges a little bit, and over here, this tab, I did remove a little bit more material. And to clean those up, I just use a utility knife. And then behind it here, so this is a little plastic that holds our kick sensor in. I think that's gonna interfere because it kind of overhangs. This is your sensor, it just snaps into that. Just unsnap it and kind of push it up out of the way. I'm just going to remove this little bit of material here. It's gonna follow the path with my knife here and get that cut out. So we should be in pretty good shape now with this all being trimmed out and everything. And just kind of a pointer I like to suggest. So our hitch, when it sits up here, there's gonna be a bracket that comes off it, and you actually tie it to this tow hook. What I like to do is take the hardware, such as a 1/2-inch carriage bolt and a flange nut in this style of spacer block, and I like to paint it black and let it dry completely beforehand. And I mean, you don't have to do that, but it does help kind of clean up the install look a little bit better, and just helps it kind of blend in. So just something I thought I'd suggest. With an extra set of hands now to get the hitch into position. So take your pull wires, drop them through the holes in the hitch, and this is definitely a tight fit. So what you're gonna have to do is kind of get the passenger side over the muffler, and then kind of pull down on your fascia, work the hitch up to position. Once your bolts drop through, what you can do is remove one of the fish wires. Take a flange nut and get at least one started on each side, hand tight. That way the hitch will support itself. So with the hitch supporting itself, you can get the rest of our hardware going. You know, you pull them fish wires off, and a lot of times, you know, when you go to put the nut on, the bolt will want to push up. So one of the things you can do is take a flathead screwdriver, put some side pressure on it, and that'll kind of hold it steady, make it a little easier to get that nut started. Once you have all these bolts in place and hand tight, come back with an 11/16 size socket and snug them down. The one here in the center, you got your carriage bolt. Slide that through and then put on this spacer block and the nut. Get that as tight as you can by hand. And then we'll snug this one down with a 3/4 inch socket. And don't forget to come back with a torque wrench and tighten down all the hardware to the amount specified in your instructions. Since we're doing our relocation bracket at a later date here, what I did was just take our fascia tabs and just ran a zip tie around everything to keep it secure. And then the one in the middle, that push pin can actually go back in place there. And I just did the same zip tie trick over here. You can rehang the exhaust, just re-lubricate it. And with these, you can usually just work them back in place by hand. Once you get that last hanger on, you can remove your strap. And then with that done, that will finish up our look at and our installation of the CURT Trailer Hitch Receiver on our 2024 Honda CR-V.